Welcome to the No Quit Living podcast. Our primary objective is to motivate and inspire our listeners to never quit. The reality of life is simple. We all fall. We all fail. At times, we get knocked down. The question is, do we get back up? Are we stronger? Are we better prepared to attain the maximum of our potential? Thank you for joining our No Quit tribe. As you go for your greatness today, never quit. And remember, we rise by lifting others up. Welcome to episode number 316 of the No Quit Living podcast. I'm your host, Christopher J. Worth, and today's theme of the day is leveling up. Our quote of the day comes to us from Elizabeth Gilbert. There's always another level up. There's always another ascension. More grace, more light, more generosity, more compassion, more to shed, more to grow. I would like to ask you to join both our mission as well as our tribe and help us spread positivity by supporting our new book, The Positivity Tribe. I really had a fun time recording today's episode. I had the privilege of recording on Kyle Depiesse's podcast about a week or so ago, and I'm honored to have him return the favor today. I hope you enjoy today's episode. Kyle, I'd like to welcome you to the No Quit Living podcast.
Happy to be here, Chris. I'm excited.
I appreciate it. I had the honor of recording on your show first, and it's always a blast when I get to return the favor. So, first question to you is, are you ready to positively impact at least one person today?
Absolutely. Yes, sir. Let's do it.
All right. The number one objective of our show is to motivate our listeners to never give up. And I was curious if you yourself have either a no-quit story or perhaps a challenging time where you could have given up or given in, but you didn't.
I honestly think, and I don't mean to give you a cheesy answer back, but I honestly think if you're living a life where you're challenging yourself and you're constantly living outside your comfort zone, you should be bumping up against this question on the daily. Like, you should be challenged so much in what you're doing because you're reaching for big things that you constantly have in the back of your head, this little voice that says, it's all right if you just quit. It's all right if you just sit this one out. So with that being said, that context, I feel like I'm constantly challenging myself, and I bump up against this a lot. But maybe for the purpose of this question and the show, I did it my first Ironman 2018. I'm going to give a big story. And I've never done an Ironman before. I just decided to jump right into it. It was Madison, Wisconsin, which is if anyone does Ironman, it's hilly. The bike is hilly. And I'm halfway through the bike ride. It's a loop. So you do the loop twice. My right quad cramps up. I've never had a quad cramp. So I get finishing up that hill, and then my left quad cramps as well. And so I've got about 40 more miles on the bike, and then I got to run a marathon with two quads that are cramped, and they feel like two cylinder blocks that you're trying to move. And I really wanted to quit. Chris. But then I think why this is important is because you do so many reps when people aren't watching you. You are building a foundation. And when we never rise to the occasion, we fall back to our training. And so had I not put on all those reps and dealt with all of that stuff, when that little voice in my head said, hey, skip this training, it's not a big deal, you'll just catch the next training. Had I not done that, and had I not overcome that, I would have quit during that Ironman race because my legs were in pain. So that is probably one of the bigger no quit stories I think that I have in my life.
Not to negate your story, but I wanted to ask if you wouldn't mind repeating the perspective. And I think there's also a similar Navy SEAL quote, but we don't rise to the occasion. We say it again.
I don't think we rise to the occasion. I think we fall back on our training. And so in that instance, I literally had on a big white sheet of paper all of the training that I had done leading up to the Ironman. Everyone sees the Ironman. No one sees the hundreds of training sessions that I had. And so we were just talking before, you've had professional athletes on your show. It's the same thing. People don't see the hundreds of thousands of free throws and all these attempts that professional athletes take. They just see game day. So not that I'm a professional athlete, but I put in a lot of training for that event. And that's the training that helps you propel and helps you get through that no quit scenario.
I love that. And there's a book that just came out. Joshua Medcalf wrote it. It's the title is Win in the Dark. And that's exactly what he talks about. And I talk about this a lot on the show. It's the whole perspective of SportsCenter. What SportsCenter is, it's the highlights of that game, the 20 seconds, 30 seconds. But to your point, it's the training. It's all the stuff that goes behind the closed doors. It's what people are doing at 6 a.m. before practice starts at 10 a.m. And I really appreciate you touching on that. And I did not mean to negate your accomplishment of the 2018 Ironman. I kind of blew that over to go back to that quote, but I think that's fascinating. And to your point of cramping up, and for our listeners, I'm not sure if you heard that, and I want to go back to it, is he said I cramped up with 40 miles to go. So it's not like, you were running a marathon and you got to 26 miles and you had 0.2 and you were just like, all right, I can walk or crawl 0.2 miles. Kyle had 40 miles to go after he cramped. So kudos to you. And I can honestly say maybe this will change in the future, but I have no desire to do an Ironman, a half Ironman. I am a very competitive person. I work out all the time, but there's not a lot of people who said, it was just amazing. It was fascinating. It was, they love having done it and being able to have that accomplishment. But I don't know a lot of people that were like, running uphill for 4 days straight was just fascinating. And there was nothing better that I want to do.
Yeah. It's probably a one and done for me, unless my son wants to do one, because I saw father, sons, mothers, all those combinations do the Ironman together. And I was like, that is cool. So if my son wants to, he's 3.5 and I'm 40. So he better do one pretty quick because I'm getting older.
I'm definitely going to reach out to your wife without you knowing and be like, Kyle really wants to do a couple with your son. So if you just casually over the next couple of years, just make sure he does it.
Plant the seed.
So if you wouldn't mind, just tell our listeners a little bit about who you are and what you do today.
Yeah. So I'm a former corporate executive. I like to say I retired. So I got a big part of my story is I got really burned out, Chris. I was chasing what I thought success was in my upper 20s, low 30s. And I thought it was all about how much money I made, the title I had, the cars that I had, the house that I had. And that self-centered pursuit of success drove me to the point where I was completely burned out. I was hating work and I was hating life. And if anyone's listening and they've been burned out or they know that when you're burned out professionally, that seeps into every category of life. So in about 5 years ago, I left corporate America and I went back to school to be a high school business teacher. I took a $100,000 pay cut per year to do that. But it was around fulfillment for me. And that's how I now define my success, is how fulfilling is it? And I knew that if I followed that, it would lead me down the path of prosperity. So I left in 2015, corporate America, became a high school business teacher, absolutely loved it. Did it for 2 years, and we had our son Cal in March of 2017. And I finished out the school year. My wife did her maternity leave. And when her maternity leave was up, the school year ended and I got promoted to being a stay-at-home dad, which I absolutely love. I love the relationship that I have with my son, the impact I have on him, the influence that I have in his life. So I became a stay-at-home dad for a season of life. And then I really started this process of connecting the dots and saying, all right, what have my experiences in life all led me to? What am I good at? How can I use my story? And how do I do all that and make a positive impact on as many people as I can? So one part of that, the business that developed, was my wife and I paid off $380,000 in debt in 38 months. And so I used everything I learned from that. And now I teach people how to do that as well. That's one part. The second part is I go back to my story of being burned out. And what happened was a couple of years ago, I just created this really fun experience on the North Shore of Minnesota. And I said, anyone who feels like they're kind of burned out, who needs to up-level their tribe, who just needs to get away, celebrate some milestones in their life, and pull back from their business to work on their business, I said, welcome in. I'm gonna set up and curate an amazing 48 hours for you. And what happened, Chris, was all guys showed up. I didn't market it that way. I didn't intend for it to be that way. But it was really clear to me that men needed a space like this. They needed a container to be around other like-minded guys, to up-level their tribe, to celebrate milestones, to challenge each other, to hold each other accountable. So I just kept doing them. I did a dog sledding one in the Boundary Waters of Minnesota and Canada. We just did Pinehurst in North Carolina, along with the NASCAR pit crew experience in Concord, North Carolina, with Chip Ganassi Racing. So I've just developed these two different, seemingly unrelated sets of businesses, but they really are related, because when I was burned out, we were so far in debt, I couldn't just quit my job and start a business. We had no money, and I couldn't afford to. Our expenses had essentially risen up to the amount of money that we were making, and I couldn't afford to leave. So we had to first clean up our debt, and then I really could start designing life and business around my lifestyle and around my values and around fulfillment. So that's my long answer to the short question.
I like that, and I think you touched on a bunch of really important things, and you said, I believe 2 or 3 times, up level their tribe, and I think that's something obviously you and I have connected, and I love that word tribe. And then it's also like-minded men, and take it a step further, it's like-minded individuals. I don't care if it's men and female or just females alone. It's the importance of leveling up. And I've shared this quote probably 100 times on my show. It's Jim Rohn, is you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most of your time with. And I think it goes back to the whole idea and concept of your comfort zone. There's a reason it's called your comfort zone, because it's comfortable. You know what it is. There's no surprises coming. But to your point, and to your change in your life and career, is you have to do something different to get different results. So I commend you on that. I would not do my job as a host if I did not ask you if you wouldn't mind just quickly sharing a little bit about your podcast, so our listeners can find it. They have to listen to all of the No Quit Living episodes first, and then they can listen to yours. But please tell us a little bit about your show, because I had the honor of being on, and it was a blast.
Well, you've got 300 some episodes, so they've got quite a bit to get through before they hop over to mine. But it's called Reaching Beyond, and it really is this play on words, because a lot of people think like this life that they desire is beyond reach. And I truly think, with a different perspective, with there again, up leveling your tribe, not quitting, if we're sticking with that theme as well, you can reach beyond all of these self-imposed limitations. So it's called Reaching Beyond. I have a lot of guests on there that develop some sort of 2.0 career. And that 2.0 career is their second act, second half, whatever you want to call it, revolves around doing something that they absolutely love. Because as you and I know, there's 70 to 80%, according to a Gallup poll, of people that quite frankly hate their job. And I reject that. I was like that for a while, but there comes a point when you have to ask yourself, am I going to keep doing that? Do I want to keep doing that for 20 years, 15, 30 years, whatever it might be? I don't think you have to. I think we're all put here on this earth for a reason, and we have to get about the business of discovering that and start doing it, because people are relying on you to use your gifts and your strengths. So for me, the podcast is all about bringing amazing guests on like yourself, who are doing incredible things to motivate, to inspire, and to provide practical tools for people to fulfill their purpose, their passion, and just live a life of fulfillment.
You touched on like 3 or 4 different things in that I absolutely think are spot on. And one is the self-imposed limitations. I think that's something that I don't know where and why and how it's come about to the level it has, but that's the biggest challenge. And when I work with a lot of my clients during those 1 or 2 or the first 1 or 2 discovery calls, that's where within half an hour, an hour, I understand and I know, based on what my clients are saying, what are those self-imposed limitations versus what are those real limitations. And I love the perspective of, the second act, that 2.0, because I think that is something in today's day and age that's super important. But one thing I wanted to touch on about your story is you had debt and you had to continue to work, and you set it up to the point where you were then able to go ahead and make that transition. I think that's where a lot of people miss the boat. They have this idea or concept and they go down the road of, I hate my job, it's not fulfilling, it's not what I'm quote unquote supposed to do, so I'm just going to stop tomorrow. And the flip side of that, I'm not saying you're signing a 30-year mortgage and saying, okay, for the next 30 years, I'm going to plan my second act. Yep. But what I always caution people is you have to have that goal, you have to have that desire, but then you have to reverse engineer steps along the way to the point where you can allow yourself to be successful. So I'm really glad that you touched on that. And maybe an interesting question, but have you found that there's one thing in common between a lot of the guests that you had, and they talk about that second act or that fulfilling work that they're doing now?
Yeah, I would say they have an unshakable sense of self-belief. They believe in themselves so much, and they know that even if they fail at something, even if they take a misstep, they believe that they will figure it out. They believe in themselves. They believe that they are charging what they're worth. And so I think it's an unshakable sense of their self-belief.
I love that, and I think that's so powerful. And what you said too is if you take a misstep, or if you have something that doesn't go exactly the right way, or doesn't go as you had planned, and that for me has been unbelievably important and powerful and educational from the perspective of asking my listener or the guest those no quit stories. And it's not the end result. Yes, I want everybody to be as successful as they can be, but for me, what I like to unwrap is, when you were down at wit's end, or you had a tough, how did you get out? What are the skills? What are the tools? So I have to ask you, because I ask everybody, are you reading anything currently, or perhaps have you read something recently that you'd like to recommend to our listeners?
I go through the book Story Brand by Donald Miller probably 2-3 times a year, just as a way to make sure I'm constantly identifying and understanding my avatar's needs and problems. But the book that I actually have it right next to me, it's called Big Enough. It's by, let me see if I get his name right, Lee Lefevre. It talks about building a business that scales with your lifestyle. So one of the things that I learned in my journey, and it's a failure, right? The failure was I was sacrificing I call it my personal balance sheet for my professional balance sheet. And I don't like that, because there's this romantic notion out there that as an entrepreneur or someone who wants to be successful, you have to put 60, 70, 80 hours of work in year after year after year, miss your kids' sports games, miss your kids' extracurricular stuff, your partner, your spouse's, the time with them, it can come second to business. I'm like, I don't believe that. I don't think you have to sacrifice your personal life for your professional one. And this book talks about building a business that scales with your lifestyle. And that is fascinating to me, because number one, I'm a family man first. I still have a lot of time at home with my son, and I want it to be that way. So I've got to figure out, how do I build a business that fits with inside that lifestyle? And this book, man, it's speaking to my heart right now.
I have not read that or even heard about that. Is that a new book?
It's newer. Yeah. I can't remember. I actually heard it on Donald Miller's podcast, speaking of Donald Miller. And I think it's relatively new, within the last year or two. And it's not that long of a book. It's a pretty easy read.
So my listeners know, without even me leading into it, that I'm going to dissect something you said about reading a book 2 to 3 times a year. And I can honestly say, prior to about halfway through these 300 plus episodes, I myself have not gone back and reread different books. And it's not because I was against it or I didn't believe it. I had that idea, I think, of that, that to-do list. And I'm a big to-do list guy, I'm a big goals guy. And I love checking off and saying, okay, I read this book, and, kudos to me. But so many guests have spoken about, well, I do this and I do that, and I read this. And a guest of mine early on had spoken about how every single year around his birthday, he reads or rereads Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And I remember the first time I heard that, I was like, oh, that's kind of neat. But then it was a second guest, a third guest, a 10th guest, a 20th guest. So in your short version of it, it's just for our listeners and even for myself too, what do you find has been the value, and why is it that book that you read that one a couple times a year?
Great question. Well, number one, I think as we learn and grow, we just become aware. We become aware of different things. So each time I read that book, I've got a different level of awareness if I'm constantly growing. And therefore, I pick up something new every single time I read it. So that's why I think it's important for some of these to reread, because you're going to learn something new each time you do it. And that book happens to be like a practical how-to type of a book. Now, if you read kind of an autobiography or something, it may not, I don't know why you would need to read it again, but I mean, but at some point, I'm really big on this. At some point, information without implementation is really just distraction. So if you're just reading a book to say that you've read, 100 books a year, but you don't actually apply anything, what's the point? Other than saying, hey, look at me, beat my chest, I read 100 books. I used to be that guy too. So I'm not making fun of anyone or calling anyone out. But at some point, I would rather you read one good book in a year and implement the heck out of that book than read 30 books and not do anything about it.
You just made fun of me, so I won't take offense to that. But all jokes aside, one thing I've become super cognizant of over the last year is I have a journal. I go through a couple of journals each year, depending upon different cycles of my life. But what I now do is I mark up my books, and then I fold down the pages for the most important takeaways. And to your point, I then take them and I put them into my journal. So even if I don't implement them immediately, I always go back and go through my journals, which leads me to my next question. Are you a believer in journals, and do you journal yourself?
I do. I don't do it as often as I should. So I probably journal, let's say, 1 to 2 times a week. However, if I'm stuck or I'm not feeling creative or something's going on in my business or my personal life where I feel overwhelmed, I journal more because I feel like there's more up here that needs to get out of here and onto paper. And for those of you who aren't watching a video, I was pointing at the space in between my ears. But I think that's really important. And there's a really great tool out there or a practice called the morning pages, morning as in MOURNING. And what you do is you take 4 blank pieces of paper in the morning and you journal and you write and you write and you write until all 4 pages are completely filled up. And what you're going to find is the first page is pretty simple. Second, third page, you're like, I don't know what to write. And you just keep, and all of a sudden you're like, do I think that? Is that really up? Like you get some weird thoughts that come out, but think of it as like you're shaking out a carpet of all the dust in the carpet. You're shaking out all the dust and the cobwebs and stuff in your head. And from time to time, you need to go through that and process all those things, get them out. And then you can come from this place of creativity and openness and abundance. So I do the morning pages journaling from time to time as well.
You just added like 2 hours to my morning routine. I appreciate that.
Yeah, you're welcome. And then burn it, and then write it, and then burn it. Don't show anyone. Burn it. Get rid of it. Don't show anyone all the stuff that's in your head. So
what if it's good though? I mean, what if it's my next book idea or like Shakespeare 2.0? Come on.
You could share that. Yeah.
So going back to a question I ask everybody is, if you had to define yourself, but you could only use one word, what word did you pick?
Wow, that is a good question. I'm going to use a similar. I'm going to say that I'm a llama, and I like to use this because I think llamas are just super fun. They're very like, what is he thinking? He's smiling, but what is he thinking? I think the aura and the mystique of a llama is the first thing that pops into my head. I don't know if that counts to answer this question, but I'm going to say a llama.
I have enjoyed our conversations, and it was a blast being on yours and having you on and mine. And I can honestly say that word llama I don't think the word llama has ever been mentioned on one of the 320 plus podcasts we've ever done. So that is a first. So kudos to you, because that is fascinating. And for any parents that are out there, I think I read llama, red pajama, like every version of it, like Christmas, Easter, whatever it is. So I have to be honest with you. As soon as you said that all I was thinking was llama, red pajama. So my mind, you could have shared something amazing, and I put myself reading to my kids again. So that was awesome. So, question I ask everybody, and I'm curious to get your answer on this too, is if you could have dinner with anybody, dead or alive, who would you pick?
Ooh, that's really good. I immediately go to U.S. presidents, and I would really like to pick the brain of Abe Lincoln. Yeah, that's what I'm going to go with, Abe Lincoln.
I get asked this all the time.
Wait. Who would you pick? Can I ask you back?
Yeah, no, you definitely.
Okay.
So I'm going to answer in 1 second, but I'm going to go back for a second. So, the three most given answers to that question are Jesus, Abraham Lincoln, and there's a why am I drawing a blank? Tesla. Why am I drawing?
Elon Musk.
Elon Musk. Wow, geez, brain fart. But
Yeah.
the three of those are the most commonly answered, and Abraham Lincoln is one of mine. So I don't have one. I have
Okay.
three, and it's Michael Jordan, Abraham Lincoln, and then it's a toss up between Andre Agassi and Rafael Nadal. So it's a very obviously sports related perspective, but that's my three. And I'm
Cool.
glad you asked, because my 3/4 have not changed over the last couple of years, and I think it would be an absolutely fascinating conversation. I don't think Rafael Nadal and Abe Lincoln would be able to understand each other, which would be interesting. I think myself and Michael Jordan or Andre Agassi would be trying to somewhat translate. And since I don't speak a word of Spanish, it might be a difficult dinner in some ways.
Yeah. You could just play tennis then. Just do serves and volleys.
Or I could just be the ball boy and just watch them play. So we're going to switch over to our hot seat questions. And the only request we ask of you is that you spit out the first thing that comes to mind.
Okay.
Last meal, you can pick absolutely anything. What do you pick?
Chicago deep dish.
Oof.
Pizza.
Favorite smell?
Oh, I almost said pizza again. You know what I love, because it's coming up in this time of year, is hot apple cider on the stove for Christmas.
All right, trivia question for you. We're changing lanes within this lane for a second. What do you think the number one answer has been for favorite smell?
Hot apple cider.
No, lavender.
chocolate?
Lavender.
Oh, come on. Really?
Yeah. Come on, really?
Okay.
All-time favorite sport?
Golf.
All-time favorite team?
Green Bay Packers.
Favorite movie?
Top Gun.
Do you have an all-time favorite author?
I love Donald Miller.
What is the favorite app you have on your phone?
It's called, it's a breathing app for breath work. It's called Stamina.
Ooh, is that a new one? I've never heard of that one.
Yeah, I don't think it's actually like for free divers, but it helps you do breath holds and things like that.
I like that. What is your background picture on your phone?
It's a view of the lake at sunset here.
Awesome. What is your all-time favorite book?
The Bible.
And do you have an all-time favorite quote?
I do. Let's make sure I get this right. Though not everything we face can be changed, nothing can be changed unless we face it.
Ooh, who's that by?
I have no idea.
He's one of my favorite. I like that. So I know that you're active on social media, and I wanted to ask this question: is during these difficult times, is there one or two people that you might want to recommend to our listeners that are a good follow, that put out positive and uplifting information, especially during these challenging times?
Of a mentor of mine, Chris Harder. That's a pretty easy one to spell. He's one. I'm trying to think of who else. What's interesting is I try and stay off social media as much as I can now. So I'm not even on it. Because I try and get my motivation, inspiration from other sources than social media. But I'll say my mentor, Chris Harder.
I've been posting as you a lot, so it's good that you're not on. You haven't seen all the stuff that I've been putting out there for you.
Okay.
And then for our listeners who want to connect with you, follow you, or also check out your podcast, if you wouldn't mind just telling them how they can do that.
Yeah. Kyle Depiesse, good luck trying to spell that. Maybe it's in the show notes or something, but it's just Kyle_Depiesse. Website is also Kyle Depiesse. And then the podcast is Reaching Beyond. Thanks for the chance to share that.
And then the last question we have for you is if you have any parting words you'd like to leave with our listeners today.
There's another quote that I like that I was going to use, and I feel like I really want to share it here. And it's sweat more in practice, bleed less in battle. And it kind of goes back to how we started this conversation talking about that no quit story. People won't see the reps you put in. They won't see all the training sessions you have. They'll judge you by the game day, so to speak. But that is nothing but a mere reflection of all the things that you're doing behind a closed door when no one's looking, when no one's watching. So sweat more in practice and you bleed less in battle.
I love that. And I think that's a perfect way to end today's episode. So Kyle, I truly, truly appreciate your time. It's been a blast. And I know that you and I will connect again soon.
Yes, sir. It's been a lot of fun. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you for listening to episode number 316. I had a great time speaking with Kyle and really touched upon a few things that stood out to me. Information without implementation is simply distraction. Think about that for a second and challenge yourself to take action whenever you can. One thing that Kyle said really hit me. He said how we don't rise to the occasion, but instead we fall back to the level of our training. How are you training? And what are you doing when nobody's looking? I challenge you today, no matter what it is you are doing, make sure that you give it your all. And remember, we rise by lifting others up. And lastly, to our listeners, thank you. We truly appreciate your time, and we hope our episodes inspire you to keep on attacking life and never giving up. To quote Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, it's always too early to quit.